I'm Kent Clizbe. I was an operations officer in the CIA. I specialize in counterintelligence vetting, counterterrorism operations, and covert action. I'm also an author, intelligence historian, and commentator. I researched and wrote Willing Accomplices when I realized that our country was committing cultural suicide. The question I had was why? A group of Americans who I call politically correct progressives is committed to destroying normal America. My goal in this project is to define them and their belief system. What is PC? Where did it come from? Could it have just spontaneously appeared in the 1960s, as some seem to believe? The first thing I did in my research was to come up with a definition and examples of PC. To boil their beliefs down to one sentence, it would be, America is a racist, sexist, xenophobic, imperialist, capitalist hellhole, and it must be changed. The next piece of PC is their attitude. It's an attitude of smug superiority. They believe that their hatred of all things American makes them superior, and that those who criticize PC beliefs are ignorant, mouth-breathing idiots. So let's look at America before PC progressives. In 1916, a high school history textbook opened with these words. The United States has taken the lead of all the nations of the world in inventions, in agriculture, in public education, and in bringing about peace and liberty on earth. When you've read this book, you will be a poor American indeed if you do not love your country more and become more willing to serve it and make sacrifices for its welfare. Now, let's consider the effects of 80 years of PC progressive tearing down of the American culture. A 2006 high school textbook opened with these words. Why should we think it is heroic to do as Columbus did? Why should we think it heroic for Andrew Jackson to drive Indians out of their land? Why should we think of Theodore Roosevelt as a hero because he fought in the Spanish-American War? My point of view, which is critical of war, racism, and economic injustice, carries over to the situation we face in the United States today. My research and my expertise in espionage led me to consider the potential that an enemy injected the anti-American message into our culture. The enemy at that time was the Soviet Union. The leaders of international communism believed that their system was destined to sweep over the world. Marxist theory predicted that once communism began, there would be no stopping its total victory over all other economic systems. He was wrong. Lenin, in 1918, quickly realized the error of Marx's predictions, so he decided to help the inevitable. The Bolsheviks, expert covert operators after decades of underground work, naturally focused on espionage operations to destroy their adversaries. Their main adversary, their target, was the United States. They focused on subverting the transmission belts of American culture. The media, Hollywood, education, and academia. Before we get into the specifics of the KGB's operations, let's talk for a minute about covert influence operations. Covert influence is an espionage operation designed to inject a message, a payload, into the target culture. It's done by way of an agent who never reveals his affiliation with the intelligence operation. That is, it's covert. An influence operation is very different from a collection operation. Intelligence collection might be something like stealing a report off of a desk at the agent's office. A collection operation is over as soon as it's carried out. The report is filed away and usually forgotten. On the other hand, the payload of a covert influence operation can live forever. A covert influence payload is very much like an advertisement. It's designed to influence how people view an issue or a person or a country. Look at these examples of influence, taken from old advertisements. Can you fill in the blanks? How long ago did you last hear or read these payloads? How powerful are influence operations? Now let's look at the people who carried out Lenin's instructions to destroy the Soviet Union's great adversary. Willy Munzenberg was an influence peddler way ahead of his time. He grasped very quickly the character of the American people, even though he'd only visited America once. He realized that Americans wanted to feel superior to their neighbors. His operational approach created organizations, fronts, that were dedicated to some high-sounding cause. He recruited Americans to join his fronts. These groups created an air of superiority. Those who belonged felt that they were forward-thinking, and they felt that those who disagreed were bad, bigoted, and stupid. Does that sound familiar today? We have Munzenberg's plans from the 1920s. His wife, who died in the late 1990s, shared the bullet points of Munzenberg's directions to his covert influence agents. These are the talking points that the agents inserted into American culture. Do these sound familiar? You claim to be an independent-minded idealist. You don't really understand politics, but you think the little guy's getting a lousy break. You believe in open-mindedness. You're shocked, frightened by what's going on right here in our own country. You're frightened by the racism, by the oppression of the working man. Today, in 21st century America, can't you just hear Michael Moore or Sean Penn or an MSNBC host or a sociology professor mouthing these exact same sentiments? You yearn for international understanding. You hate fascism. You think the capitalist system is corrupt. And you say it over and over and over again. Let's take a look at the willing accomplices, Americans, who helped Munzenberg's operations. His first target was American media. Walter Durante was the New York Times man in Moscow from 1924 to 1936. My research revealed that the KGB spotted and developed him from nearly the first day he arrived in the USSR. He was provided with all he wanted: girls, cars, apartments, luxury food, wine. In return, Durante's New York Times reporting injected into American culture a positive view of communism and the Soviet Union. Munzenberg's operations against academia and education hit a home run in the mid-1920s. Counts was the Columbia University Teachers College International Institute's expert on Russia. Even though he'd never been there before his first trip after his appointment to Teachers College in 1927, he returned a changed man. He had a Russian book that he pretended to translate, and he published it in America soon after. It was the Soviet school book used to indoctrinate Russian school kids for the first 5-year plan. Counts from then on spouted a collectivist view of education. He denigrated traditional American individualism. Today, he's revered in American schools of education as the father of the social reconstructionist approach to education. Dorothy Parker was a writer. She started her career in New York City and ended up writing in Hollywood. She was supposedly a wit. Parker was a member of literally dozens of Munzenberg's front organizations. She took part in his first operation, the Sacco and Vanzetti protests. She traveled to Spain, where she broadcast over the communist radio network, which was controlled by the KGB. But she avoided any other direct involvement with communist organizations. A telling quote from Parker was a line she wrote in a movie about the moron millions in America not being smart enough to understand what was good for them. Munzenberg's talking points, inserted throughout our culture, are today's PC progressive talking points. Munzenberg created politically correct progressives' belief system of today. So let's look at today, 2013. It took 8 decades for the Munzenberg payload to fester and ferment in the dark recesses of anti-traditional American willing accomplices. In the 1950s, the message was exposed, but the willing accomplices struck back with a tactic learned from the KGB, which we'll discuss in a minute. The payload sunk below the surface. In the 1960s, the payload began again to emerge in the anti-American attitudes that arose in that decade. Finally, by the 1980s, PC progressivism took full flower. And with the election of Barack Obama, we have the first anti-American presidential administration in the history of our country. Traditional American culture has been destroyed, and the Munzenberg operation continues. Ironic, isn't it? Munzenberg, Lenin, Counts, Parker, Durante, all the original players are rotting wherever America haters go when they die. Never in their wildest dreams did they think that their operation would bear fruit so many decades later. One last note as an indicator of PC progressivism. The KGB taught its operators a simple tactic to follow when their operations were exposed. I call it Andemka. It's a clear indicator of a PC progressive today, and it was inherited from the originators of their belief system. So, what can we do? It's up to each of us. Here's some ideas, but we do need to take back our culture. Good luck. You can find full details of my research and analysis in the book. It's available on Amazon.com, as a Kindle, as a paperback, and coming very soon as an Audible audio book. You can see the website for the book at www.willingaccomplices.com. Thanks for listening, and think positive.